people of YouTube land? This is the Noto Wrestling Fan here today for a new series. Last week I did an impressions of Kingdom Hearts 2.8, and then I thought to myself, this would be a really great idea for a series. It was simple to make, it was fun, people seemed to generally enjoy what it was, so I thought like this will be kind of like a sort of replacement of DWF France, and not to mention I have far more drive to do it than DWF France, as with DWF France I always had to come up with a new topic to talk about. Now, I'm not going to say that this is going to completely erase what DWF France is, but this is going to be the main focus of my channel now. I'm going to be doing marathons of series and giving you my impressions on the games within those series. It's a pretty simple idea, and a good concept in my opinion. So, without further ado, I thought the first games that I would do would be of the Final Fantasy franchise. And I'm going to do the Tetsuya Nomura era Final Fantasy games. So that would be 7, 8, 9, X, X2, 13, 13-2, 13-3, and ending with 15. And if this gets enough support, I might do things like Dissidia, Duodecim, World of Final Fantasy, Crisis Corps, etc. So yeah, I'll throw in some spin-offs if this gets enough support, but without further ado, let's start off with the biggest game and most infamous game of the franchise, Final Fantasy VII. Now, before I sort of begin into this, Final Fantasy VII, regardless of what your opinion is, it's a very important game, and without it, JRPGs would not be popular over here, as Final Fantasy VII was the gateway for many people to experience the Japanese-style games in North America. Like, before this, Final Fantasy, there was this weird number thing that they did, where yes, we got Final Fantasy 1 over here, but 2 and 3 were completely skipped. So we ended up getting 2 as 4, and we ended up getting 3 as 6. So we actually missed the real versions of 2, 3, and 5. We only got 4 and 6 over here, and then we jump all the way to 7 from 3? It's pretty obscure, and not to mention in some European regions, Final Fantasy VII was actually the very first game that they ever got of the series. Isn't that pretty ridiculous? So regardless of how much the game is aged, regardless if you think it's overhyped, it doesn't matter, it's inconsequential. Like Mario Bros. It's one of those games that needs to be there, and you need to respect it for being there. But now, I'll get on to my fully fledged opinions of the game. Now, for me, does Final Fantasy VII live up to its infamous, absurd reputation of being one of the greatest games ever made? Well, no, it does not live up to being one of the greatest games ever made, because it's a pretty simplistic game when you get down to it. Like other Final Fantasy games are pretty complex in terms of story and combat and characters, and a lot of things in 7 are pretty toned down and simplistic, even from past games. Like 4 and 6, they had much more complicated story elements and characters. The gameplay is pretty much the same. It's the active time battle system that was used in 4 and pretty much every single damn Final Fantasy game up to that point. But I do kind of respect this decision to kind of make Final Fantasy VII accessible, because if it wasn't made accessible for newcomers to the genre, which had a painful reputation of being extraordinarily difficult to get into, we probably wouldn't have taken it off, and we probably wouldn't have had other great games from this franchise over here, at least in the West anyway. So even though personally I don't really enjoy the sort of watered down difficulty of the game, I do respect why they did it, and I understand why they did it. Now, calling all the characters simplistic isn't really a good thing either, because let's talk about the lead character of the game, Cloud Strife, for a little bit. Now, a lot of people get Cloud Strife confused with being a complete emo F-boy, but that's not the case. I mean, Google Images will lie to you, because every single one of his images is like him with his Buster Sword looking down at the ground looking all mopey and sad. But how you can decipher people who have actually played Final Fantasy VII or the people that are the posers that just say, oh yeah, it's a great game, is if they call Cloud emo. Cloud's not an emo. Cloud's actually a dork. Like, he's a dude that talks in 90s lingo, and he does, like, the stupidest, most dorky things. Like, yeah, he does get pretty mopey when the infamous moment when Aerith dies right in front of him, but it's kind of understandable, and that's actually, like, wouldn't you get mopey if the love of your life was killed right before your eyes? Like, you kinda would. But he pretty much stays pretty optimistic, actually, throughout this, until his mental breakdown in the middle of the game, where basically you just see him all in his chubby form. Like, the graphics, yeah, definitely have aged a little bit, but there's still something so undeniably charming about them. Like, little Cloud Strife Lego man, little Tifa Lego. It looks like a freaking Lego game, and it's adorable. But you see him, like, rocking in his rocking chair and, like, going insane in a mental institution. Like, Since when is going insane adorable? Final Fantasy made that a thing. Well, it made going insane adorable with its visual style. But then it's kind of after that mental breakdown, he picks himself up and he becomes a pretty damn good leader. So Cloud actually gets a pretty decent amount of character development. There is a reason why he's sort of the face of the entire franchise. Now, I do feel that there's other characters of the series that do get more development and probably should be more respected, but I love Cloud at the end of the day. He's a very good protagonist. And you know, some of the other characters, like when people think of Final Fantasy VII characters, they primarily think of 3 characters, I think anyway. They think of Cloud, Strife, Tifa Lockhart, and Sephiroth. Now, Tifa's also a really good sidekick character, and I believe that she's actually a better leader than Cloud is just due to her more upbeat personality, and she's always sort of the one that's planning out everything. She's always the one that's getting your team hyped for the battles and such like that. She kind of is the reason why Final Fantasy has the best slew of female characters in the series. So when frickin' feminists talk about like equality in games and shit, like Miss Anita Sarkeesian, why don't you look at Final Fantasy, huh? You want your equality, huh? Well, take a look at Final Fantasy, any Final Fantasy game. Like, there you go, that's your equality right there. So, generally, yes, I do like the 2 lead characters, and the main villain, Sephiroth, I will say is actually my favorite villain of the entire franchise, because he is an extraordinarily deep character. I'd say he's the most developed deep character to the entire game, because you actually feel sympathy for the devil, because Sephiroth wasn't always a bad man. It's just, he kind of, like Cloud does later in the game, he just kind of went insane when he learned of Genova and stuff like that, but yeah, there was a reason why people called him Sephiroth the hero. It's because he was once upon a time a hero. So it's just, I do appreciate that character arc. And not to mention, like, somehow even in that frickin' chubby form, he still looks badass with his Masamume sword. It's ridiculous. And then you just see him in, like, the newest Dissidia arcade game, which just today got announced that it was actually coming to PS4, and I'm really excited for that. You see, like, the way he looks now, and it's just ridiculous. Like, literally, Sephiroth's, like, one of my favorite character designs in all of fiction. He's just so ridiculously awesome looking. But that's a subjective thing, as a lot of people, I love, personally, the Tetsuya Nomura character designs. Tetsuya Nomura pretty much did all the character designs in Final Fantasy VII, 8, 10, and 13. And those are, oddly enough, my favorite games of the franchise, so that's a little spoiler. I am a Tetsuya Nomura fanboy, as I also love Kingdom Hearts, and a whole slew of other of his games, too. They say World Ends With You and such, so yeah, I do show a little bit bias towards them, but, so honestly, I don't know how people could dislike the art style of the characters, but, you know, whatever works for you. Looks are a subjective thing, I guess, so I can't really control that, but personally, I generally like the aesthetic of the game of Final Fantasy VII, so, yeah, take what you will from that. I guess this should probably put me on the graphics in general, and this is where I think I'm really excited for the remake, as the visual style is amazing in Final Fantasy VII. What they managed to do at this time with that hardware was really innovative. It was the first, like, full 3D JRPG adventure, so of course it was innovative for its time. And the in-battle character models have actually aged pretty well. They look fantastic. So yeah, there's a lot of things that do have aged well in Final Fantasy VII. Like I said, the overall design of the world and such is great. Like, the slums of Midgar isn't like any other game you'd see, or at least of the genre. It felt more real. And that's why I like Final Fantasy so much, is it's a series that feels more real and sort of grounded than other franchises. I even think Final Fantasy might even feel more real than Assassin's Creed at points, because Assassin's Creed, even though it's meant to be in the real world, it's on Earth in the 1400s or whatever, in whatever unique exotic location you're in, they do get very supernatural and freaky, but I don't know, there's always something that felt very real about Final Fantasy, which is odd, because it's called fantasy, it's not meant to feel real, but whatever. But the in-game graphics have aged very poorly, to some people. Like, for me, as I said previously in this video, I find the sort of Lego Man looking character models, the blocky models, to be very charming. But there's always one thing I wondered, like, how the hell does Tifa Lockhart become a sex symbol when she looks like this? Like, how? Were people just really easy to please before the internet was a thing? Like, damn.
I pity the fools. But there are a lot of, I went over those characters, but there's a lot of characters that don't get a lot of attention, and they probably should. So optional characters that shouldn't be optional, like frickin' Yuffie Kugasari and Vincent Valentine, are characters that typically get neglected. And not to mention Final Fantasy VII has my all-time least favorite character of the franchise, Cait Sith, who's basically just completely useless on all fronts. It has a limit break that frickin' kills you. It's supposed to be a 50-50 thing where it kills the enemy or it kills you, but it's like 99% to 1. It'll always kill you. So every time I've used Cait Sith, I always die. So don't use Cait Sith, he sucks. And not to mention there's that part where he is a literal turncoat. He's been working for Shinra the entire time. And you just have to go along to get along with this artist for the rest of the game, and it's just, that's a plot device. Like, Cait Sith's turncoat is just one that completely gets neglected. It's a plot element that completely vanishes. That's why I bring that up, where I say that some things were watered down, which I think they can do better in the upcoming remake of Final Fantasy VII, as there are a lot of plot elements that just kind of vanish in hopes for progressing the main story with the characters that people actually probably give a damn about. So whereas people like Cloud are fully developed characters, people like Sid or Barrett are completely the same. Like, basically you have a chocolate and a vanilla version of the exact same character. Maybe like Barrett has that thing with Marlene, the baby girl and whatever like that, and then Sid, he has his redneck genius thing, but at the heart of it, they're still edgy dudes that swear a lot at the end of the day. And their personalities never really form past that, whereas people like Cloud and Tifa, you noticeably see them grow a lot over the game. So equal attention would have been better for a lot of characters, but they really neglected a lot of characters just in hopes of building up 3 characters. Now, those 3 characters were built up nicely, but like I said, I still stay. More attention would have been nice for the other cast of the game. The combat is pretty much what you would have ever come to expect from Final Fantasy at the time. It was turn-based goodness, and you know, you can use magic and attacks, and it's basically your standard JRPG when it comes to that aspect, but the thing that sets it apart from the rest was the materia system, which was actually fairly clever for its time. Instead of just simply leveling up your characters and fighting, Final Fantasy VII was pretty much one of the first JRPGs that allowed for experimentation and having every character and having every materia work for the player that was actually playing the game. So that's probably why Final Fantasy VII gained popularity, is because it was very unique from other JRPGs with that one gameplay aspect. Because in that realm, everybody viewed JRPGs as just being the same. Spiky-haired dude with sword, tomboy princess, logically advanced civilization that shouldn't be technologically advanced, steals a crystal, you go back, you get the crystal, you fight the hot chick that has like 7 forms, and then you end it with an almighty attack that you've never seen before in the game. And then that's the game. The credits roll, you get the crystal black, blah blah. There's probably a death somewhere in there too. But Final Fantasy VII broke a lot of cliches, so that is a good thing. But yeah, let's just say you put HP plus materia down, that'll probably drain your magic. So strength things will drain your magic, and magic things will drain your strength. So you gotta focus on what the heck you want your character to be. Personally, I made Cloud an all-rounder. He wasn't the completely strongest character of my party when I was playing the game, but he had a very good mix of strength and magic. I focused Tifa on being completely power, so for attacking, because once you get her God Hand weapon, if you equip the Death Blow materia, it's a critical hit every single time. So usually, by endgame, like even at just like level 50, I was at least hitting 4,000 damage with her from using the critical hit system that she had. And then for magic, I mainly focused on Sid, who had a pretty decent magic stat, and he definitely got the job done. Like, his Ultimas would usually do around 6,000 damage at that time, which was, like I said, by the end of Final Fantasy VII, I'm usually at around levels 50 to 55, depending on if I do side quests and the whatnot. Final Fantasy VII actually doesn't have much in the way of side quests, though. There's, what does I call it? The Woonbang Town or whatever it is, with Yuffie, and can go there and do some stuff, but it's kind of inconsequential. It just only serves to really give her backstory on what she is and what she does, and her materia thief. It's basically her character backstory, and I don't appreciate her backstory and character being locked away behind a side quest that probably not anybody would even guess to do without a freaking guide, because getting to the place is odd in its own way. Not to mention that getting Yuffie to begin with is completely odd, and you would totally have to be following a guide to know to run through one of the many forests of the games until she shows up, beat her, then select the right dialogue cues. But Final Fantasy VII was an old game, and like I said, this is pre-internet, so there really wasn't any game facts back in the day. Or if you did have the internet and a computer, you were insanely lucky, but mainly people were still playing off of guides. And they used Final Fantasy VII to sell memory cards, like, are you going to be able to beat this game without a memory card? And for some reason, all I can think of is some kid in the 90s that rents Final Fantasy VII from a Blockbuster and actually does it like a savage. I don't know how, it's all I can think about. But, in terms of difficulty, Final Fantasy VII is a very, very easy game by Final Fantasy standards. Usually bosses I kill in the first couple of hits. Now there are some bosses that are cheaply placed when you probably won't have any materia equipped on a person. That's the frickin' worst, when you have a party member with no materia. That happened to me more times than not. And during my playthroughs, I've played Final Fantasy VII twice. I've only died once. And that was my very first playthrough to what I consider the hardest boss in the game, the Demon Wall, which is the very last boss you fight with Aeris. Some people call her Aerith, I call her Aeris. It's a double pronunciation, both are right, so but that's kind of a confusing thing that people do say, Aeris or Aerith. It's just, you can pronounce it any way you want, because even in Advent Children, some of the characters pronounce it Aeris, and some people call her Aerith, so I hope I was able to clear something up with that. Just personal preference, ladies and gentlemen. But even some of the bosses that have a notorious reputation for being hard, like the carrier arm, I was just equip your frickin' thunder materia and be done with it in like a few rounds. It's really simple. Or another thing that you can do is stockpile your limit breaks if you're having a hard time, which is admittedly the greatest fricking thing that Final Fantasy VII does over the rest of the PS1 era, is you can save up your limit breaks. You're not forced to use them. They do replace the attack command, but you still have your magic, your defense, and you can also supplement attack for Death Blow if you want to. Which is what I would usually do. I always had Death Blow equipped on one of my characters so I could store up my limit breaks for a boss fight. And usually I just use like every character's limit break and be done with the thing in a few rounds. I know it's like a little cheap way out, but it's the efficient way to do things, and you'd kind of be stupid not to. It's like in Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. You would be a fool to not use balloon magic. You're just gonna use it. I know you are. You might say you don't, but everybody does. Now, before I sort of wrap this up, I thought I would end this with my impression on the most infamous part of the game, the ending of Disc 1, where Aerith is trying to summon Holy to save basically the entire world. And then Sephiroth comes down and stabs her right in front of Cloud, and then she's gone for the rest of the series. You never see her again. She does appear in Kingdom Hearts, but Kingdom Hearts isn't canonical to Final Fantasy, so it doesn't really count. A lot of people probably saw this as sad or powerful because there's no Phoenix down that can revive her. But I actually see this as a complete stupid thing on Square's part, and it's for gameplay purposes. Aeris was the white mage, she was the healer, like, for crying out loud, why would you kill off a character that freaking important in your roster? I always use Aeris in Disc 1, so why the hell would you kill her off? It always pisses me off when I see her die. She's like, well, great, I gotta rework my entire team again. So where I was probably meant to see that as a sad emotional moment, I was just thinking to the game's head, because that moment is so ridiculously spoiled that I even knew well before I even played any Final Fantasy game that Aeris dies in Final Fantasy VII. It's the most popular video game spoiler ever. So when I actually ended up playing, I was like, oh yeah, this is the part where she dies, and now I'm gonna have to completely redo my whole team over again. Thanks, Square, that was a real dick move. So I think I should be getting to wrap this up with sort of my final thoughts of Final Fantasy VII. It's a very important game, and it's a game that I'm glad exists. There's a lot of good in Final Fantasy VII, but there's also a lot of stuff that has aged pretty poorly. Even on the back of the box it says quite possibly the greatest game ever made, and as of 1997, that could have actually been very accurate, as the game was super ahead of its time. But the game is oversung, it's overdone, and it's overrated compared to other games of the franchise. Even on the PS1 era, there's one game that does everything way better, and that's the very next game we're going to be talking about. A lot of people will disagree with that, but the next game, Final Fantasy VIII, is literally the definition of what I consider to be the swan song of the classic era of Final Fantasy. VII, however, is still a game that I highly recommend everybody play at least once in their life, because there's a lot of good things that the game has to offer. I hate the mini-games, I forgot to mention that. I despise every single damn mini-game they make you play because they don't work. Like, there's this one where you have to do this soldier march and the viewership ratings, and I swear I don't know how to do it at all. I always just luck out by doing it. I have to log up a video every single time, and I just sort of follow the steps. I have no idea how the heck I'm supposed to keep my viewership up. It's ridiculous. So, that's one thing I forgot to say with Final Fantasy VII. I despise the minigames. So a lot of people, like, remember a lot of things fondly about the game. However, there is some things that are not good. But hell, even in the best of games, there are some things that aren't perfect. Even in my personal favorite game of all time, with my Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask that didn't suck my hairy right nut. I hate the Deku Playground. So, I'll overlook the few mini-games just for the sake of keeping things more friendly for this. I don't want to rag on Final Fantasy because I actually really enjoy the game. And the soundtrack with some of the songs like Genova, One Winged Angel, they're some of the most iconic songs in video game history for a reason. Like Nobuo Uematsu really outdid himself with that soundtrack, and as he would for the next few Final Fantasy games. But the positives that I'll always take away from Final Fantasy VII were its sense of humor. Like, having Cloud cross-dress, and like, there was like some racist stuff in the game, too. Which makes me wonder how the heck they're going to implement this with social justice warriors with the remake. I don't want to see them take anything out, because it was the stuff like that made Final Fantasy VII so charming. So, screw it. Like, put Cloud in a dress, and don't have it be anything other than comedy. Don't, like, do your LGBT crap with it. Just so I'm just putting that out there, because like I said, there's a lot of things that are outdated, literally in life, that are outdated with this game, that some people might not take the right way because everybody's just a bunch of wimps these days. But honestly, I beg Square to keep everything the way it was. Just basically update the graphics, like remake the game, yes, but keep everything the way that we know it, because there was a lot of, like, the story and the characters and their interactions were freaking legendary in 7. And so, let's just wrap this up. Final Fantasy VII. It's definitely a great game that has earned its spot in a video game Hall of Fame. Without it, there are so many experiences that we probably wouldn't have gotten. So with that, you should, even whether or not you like it or you dislike it, you still gotta respect what the game did to the gaming industry over here. Final Fantasy VII isn't my all-time favorite Final Fantasy game, but it's definitely one that I do enjoy, and I'd stick it in my top 5 any day. So if you play this game, go in knowing that it's aged pretty poorly, but still have fun with it. That's what I did. Just remember that at the end of the games are games. Just enjoy them for what they are. And with that, this is, I guess the first episode of the series is now finished. Screwing up my lines because I'm not scripted, but whatevs, I'll deal with this in editing. Haha. So with that, I guess this impression series, not the series, but at least this episode of Impressions concludes. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more videos like this in the future. I will definitely do more of them. You have my guarantee that I will be doing 8, 9, X, X2, and 13. And like I said, if I get enough support on this episode, like let's just say if it reaches like 30 views or whatever, I might throw in games like Crisis Core or World of Final Fantasy, as I really enjoy those games as well, and I do have a lot to say about them. Now with that, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Wrestling Fan, signing out!